Hi, I'm Rob. Welcome back to Life Rewired. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. Please visit our website, myliferewired.com. Scroll over to the resources tab, and you will see all kinds of resources on there. If you're a new brain injury survivor, or even if you've been around the block for a long time, I'm still throwing things on there that I find that's helpful for me. And I'm almost 5 years into my journey. So head on over to there. And then also, if you want to be on the program, there's a tab that's called Contact Us. If you click on that, you can fill in your email address and we'll get back with you and get you on the program. Speaking of getting on the program, someone who did just that is with me today. And her name is Meike McDonald. And she's here to talk today about her husband, Mitchell. And Meike, welcome to the program, first of all. And we got to talk just a few minutes before the program, so it was so nice to get to know you. So first of all, please just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how your husband got his brain injury.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Meike McDonald, and I'm a high school math teacher. This is my 20th year teaching high school math. I have a doctorate in education. I have spent 14 years in public ed, and I went international for 6 years. I actually came back to the U.S. in 2020, so I've been back doing public ed the past few years. 6 weeks after I got married, my husband, Mitchell Driggers, was involved in a motorcycle accident here in Florence, South Carolina. Unfortunately, he was not wearing a helmet, so he has a severe traumatic brain injury. That caused us to spend 6 weeks here in our local Trauma 2 hospital and 14 weeks at Shepherd Center, an inpatient and outpatient rehab center for brain injury survivors and those with spinal cord injuries. His injury also resulted in a left leg amputation below the knee.
That's got to be hard.
Yes.
Yeah. Finding out who your new self is along with an amputation, I mean, that has to be hard. And then finding yourself in the role of a caregiver, that's a role that you probably had no idea what you were getting signed up for, but you know exactly what a lot of our other caregivers know about. And that's why I love to have caregivers on the podcast, because I say this every time, caregivers are the unsung heroes. Because like it or not, we can be difficult at some times. And it's not because we want to be. We have a lot going on, the emotions, you see the emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to find out who you are again. So first, before we get into the caregiver portion of that, how, when he came through this, first of all, was he unconscious for the 6 weeks or,
Pretty much, yeah, for quite a while.
yeah. So then waking up to find out, hey, my life has changed forever. How was that, first of all, dealing with that?
Well, he had to end up getting the brain shunt to relieve the hydrocephaly, the swelling in his brain. So that made a big difference. So it was a few months before he really regained consciousness. He came to, and still to this day, he wakes up. We're 17 months out. Where am I? Where do we live? What city? What state? He really lost about the last 20 to 25 years. And
Wow.
so every morning we go through a cycle of the day, the date, the year, when was his accident, how long has it been, and things like that, because it just took a major gap. When he hit his head, the left frontal lobe, it affected then the right side of the body and
Yeah.
then the brain stem. And so every day is almost like a new day for him. It's really a
Hmm.
struggle. And like you said, a very cyclic cycle of emotions every day, extreme, every
Yeah.
almost emotion you can imagine he has every single day.
Yeah. I do know that there's a lady that I'm friends with in one of the support groups. She is 30 years, and forgive me for my numbers. My numbers come out weird because of the injury, but she's 30 years into this. She was a child. Well, I guess like a young child, like middle school ish age or whatever. But she has a book on her side table that she has a note on it that says, "You're not 1-2 anymore."
Hmm.
If she doesn't see that book in the morning, she gets up and she gets dressed, ready to go to school.
Yeah, and so he's 47. He thinks he's still going to school. When I tell him he's 47, he doesn't believe me. He'll go, "You're lying. That's not right." I'll say, "Well, how old do you think you are?" His 30s. So I even took a big Post-it note paper because I'm a teacher, and I wrote in marker on this massive Post-it note that sticks to the wall, "You are 47 years old. Your birthday is December 12th, 1977. We live in Florence, South Carolina. You
Mm,
are married to Meike McDonald." Because I kept noticing some of these common questions daily. So I thought, well,
yeah.
if he can read it, that might help him. And one day the speech therapist tells me, that Mitch told her I was lying, that I had it wrong, that I wrote he was 47, but he's not. But he often asks me about school every morning. What time do I have to go to school? I've got to go to school. And even on the weekends, I'll
Yeah.
say, "No, Mitch, we don't have school. We don't have therapy." Because sometimes speech therapy is like school. They're playing games, they're writing worksheets. So I'll say, "Yeah, you're right. Therapy is like school, or
Yeah.
speech therapy is like school. You're right." But no, it's the weekend. So it's very hard from him, very confusing. And he'll, "I got to get up, I got to get ready, I got to go to school." Starting about 5 o'clock in the morning is when the cycle starts. "Hey, is someone coming to help me get ready? What time do we have to wake up?" It's 5 o'clock. He'll read the clock and start kind of freaking out. 5, 6, 7. He'll wake up every hour, kind of looking very stressed out about the time and day and what day of the week is it.
Mm. Yeah. And as a caregiver, that's hard because you don't like to see your loved one be like going through that all the time. My wife, she has to constantly remind me of people who's passed away.
Hmm.
So I get to relive those emotions every time. I mean, it just happened yesterday. We went to a restaurant. I can't remember the restaurant, but we were sitting there and she goes, "Do you know who that is across the aisle?" And I said, "Yeah, that's so and so's daughter." And she's like, "Yeah." And then she goes, "So and so passed away 6, 8 years ago." I can't remember what she told me. But I was like, "Wow, I had no idea." And she's like, "We went to the funeral. You did know it at the time, but you just don't remember it." So it's like a gut punch every time because you're like, man, you're thinking that I haven't talked to, my aunt so and so for a few days, and come to find out they've been gone 5 years. So
That
it's
happened with
hard.
his dad. For the longest time, he kept saying things about his dad. "I've got to go to Ohio. I've got to see my dad. I hadn't talked to my dad. My dad haven't called." For the most part, now he realizes my dad is dead. So now he'll say, "Is dad buried?" And I'll say, "Well, no, he got cremated. We have the ashes." But that took a while for him to to realize, dad is dead. And
Yeah,
then, like you said, sometimes when you say, "Oh, well, your grandma died," or even one day I said, "Oh, my dad died," and he just started crying. And I said,
yeah,
"Mitch, it's okay. My dad wasn't the best guy on the planet. You don't have to cry." But, like he cried about his grandma. And I thought, if this was pre-brain injury, he would have never cried about his grandma dying.
hmm,
And different people, he'll get sensitive and just, cry.
yeah,
And, it's okay. But yeah, that is one piece, hopefully that's kind of sticking. But every now and then he will forget that or ask about someone, or, "Hey,
yeah,
is so and so dead?" Or now, sometimes if he does think of someone out of the blue, like a friend or coworker or whatever, he'll say, instead of "Hey, is Rob around?" He'll say, "Is Rob dead? Is Rob still alive?" So that's something that we battle with. And
yeah,
even with the motorcycle injury, all he cares and thinks about is the motorcycle, even though that almost killed him. And he actually lost two good friends, one guy way before the accident, about 10 years ago, and one guy post accident on a motorcycle. He still has this alternate reality. I can drive, I can walk, I can ride a motorcycle. And that's all he thinks about and wants. And it's kind of almost the only thing that brings him happiness. So that's another struggle with that alternate reality, too. And
yeah,
luckily, I hired a brain coach, a TBI brain coach, to help me, because Mitch's case is quite severe. So he has to
yeah,
have help with all functions 24/7. We have a CNA caregiver while I'm teaching, and then I'm there. But, I need to better learn from Mitch. Shepherd was great about therapy and sessions, but when we left Shepherd, he was nowhere cognitively where he is now. I mean, he's been home just over a year, about a year and a month or so. And so he was nowhere near that level of cognition, recognition, talking, walking, prosthetic and stuff
Yeah.
now. So I know they did the training. I know they told me stuff and I go, gosh, I wish I would have listened or paid attention and go back to it because we're at some of those stages now. But that's another thing too with reality versus this alternate reality. Or,
Right.
one day as I driving a truck or riding a motorcycle and I said, well, Mitch, like, let's think about it. You can't walk, you're practicing at therapy. And he says, take me outside. I'll go run around the yard. And I thought, oh my goodness. So then you have that aspect of things
Yeah.
too on a daily basis that makes it hard. Sometimes you agree and go ahead. And then sometimes you try to be realistic. And then the gamut emotions to come, like you said,
Yeah.
of, oh my gosh, I'm worth this. I can't walk. I can't drive. I can't work. I can't ride a motorcycle. All the things that brought me joy as a man, as a worker, as a guy that liked to do yard work, be outside, have friends, have buddies. Now that's been taken away. And so every day it's just a cycle, and it's very hard emotionally and mentally. Even,
It is.
poor guy, for him, the TBI coach is trying to help me better understand him, and what he's going through from his point of view, but also me, mentally as a wife and
Yeah.
caregiver. Like you said, I had to take on a new role I never had planned on at almost the age of 43, 42 when it happened. But it's been a lot of learning and learning curves and a lot of like brick wall after brick wall with different things that have happened the past year and a half.
Right. Yeah. My wife, I put her through the gamut, and people think, oh, he's so pleasant and so kind, and I try to be, but everyone has their breaking point, and everyone has their bad days, and I'll say things that are inappropriate, and I'm sure your husband probably does the exact same thing because I've not been a brain injury survivor that doesn't have a filter anymore. But I'll say things that are inappropriate, and they'll embarrass her. And then we'll have the talk before and the talk after. Rob, you don't announce that you're going to the bathroom. Just don't do things like that.
Yeah.
And I try to keep that in my head, but then, the urge comes and I make the announcement to the room, I'll be back. I got to go to the bathroom. So,
And you're lucky to still be married, because I knew that the divorce rate was very high. And that was with me being a
yes.
high school math teacher. I asked the TBI coach what the statistic was, and it's a 90% divorce rate.
Yeah. That shocked me. That was a big gut punch when I read that, because you think that, for better or worse, when you get to the worst part, that's when the rubber meets the road, and you're thinking, okay, this is where we got to get really serious, and we're in this together. But
And I
sometimes it just,
understand, because
yeah.
it is a struggle, especially with, I don't know, because I haven't experienced milder brain injuries, but it's definitely with the severity of the one. It's very hard cognitively, like I said, at times. And then even for me, it's just very emotional, very mental, very draining. Thank goodness I have a
Yeah.
great therapist and people to talk to and resources, but it is a lot.
Your life is spun on a dime. Um, and I'm so proud that you've stuck with him through this, and that you've taken on this role seriously. Because like you said, so many people just put their hands up and say, I can't deal with this.
Yeah, and that's something, that I think about a lot. It's very hard because I find I'm losing myself in this. He doesn't have independence, and, I have very little because, the CNA caregiver is there when I'm at work, and then it's pretty much me, the full time afterward. And so, it's a lot of things. Luckily we don't have children. He didn't have any children. I never had children. And so I can focus on him and the time, the money, and the energy. And I often think, God knew what he was doing, because if we were, having children or had children, this may or may not be the case. And something that I really have to work on and just pray about. And that's one thing my shirt says, kind of faith over fear, because in the beginning it was so critical with Mitch. We didn't know if he would survive. And the doctors had told us, hey, take this minute by minute, not even hour by hour. And I just was kind of shocked, and I couldn't even pray or think. And, thank God other people were there to kind of pray for us and, help him live and survive. It was so touch and go for a while, but with the severity of the nature. And, with me being young, I didn't know medical terms. I'm a high school math teacher. I really had not spent much time in hospitals. My grandparents kind of died older, more natural deaths at home. It wasn't like long drawn out, whatever you have at the end of life. It just
Right.
was more natural. And so, I had to learn a lot, but thank goodness that I have that researcher in me, and I like to know, and that I've sought out resources because we do live in a more rural part of South Carolina. There is no, a lot of brain injury
Yeah.
resources, rehab. I got in touch with a lady who has a nonprofit kind of grassroots organization, which is open to any more of not only TBIs, but things like strokes,
Yeah.
vertigo, all the various neurodivergent type things. But
Hmm.
she's helped me a lot. But, just like you talk about your organization, no doctor or nurse said, hey, there's a brain injury association of South Carolina, or hey, there's this grassroots lady that's starting this group, or, an amputee coalition. Hey, you can get a peer buddy that's also an amputee that can come talk to your husband and come meet with him. And that was the one thing, Rob, that I think I found hard is I want to find people that look like my husband. Where are other adults that kind of look like him or he can fit in?
Hmm.
And he got to join the Miracle League baseball team here in Florence. And that's for
Awesome.
people with various abilities.
Yeah.
And everyone in all of the 18 teams were born with their various ability. He acquired his later.
Mhm.
And I heard a few boys say, what happened to his leg? I could tell from the comment they had never seen an amputation. And so it's just important for me, for him to try to get to see people that look like him. So we go to an amputee support group. We go to the brain injury or kind of the neuro navigators, the local grassroots support. And I try to do some online things when I can, because when you aren't in a bigger city, you are limited with resources. Like I said, hitting those brick walls. Once we left the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, it was kind of like, good luck, and I just hit brick wall after brick wall trying to find the right therapist. We were trying to do at-home therapy, but outpatient work. And I hustled and got a wheelchair van for like around $5,000 from an ambulance company. And
Really?
when I was at Shepherd Center, they were showing me stuff anywhere from 70,000 to 130.
Yeah.
And so, it's just like you've got to be resourceful and ask people for help. And
Hmm.
thank goodness, like I said, I have a background that makes me want to research and look and learn being a teacher. And not having the children, having the resources and time, money,
Yeah.
energy to do some of these things. And so, and then I think, where are all the TBI people at? When I talk to therapists, they say, well, there may be one other TBI person that comes. And then the amputee, the guy with the amputee support group, they serve 500 people in the area. He goes, Mitch is my
Wow.
only TBI client. And I'm going, where are they at? I want to meet other people with TBIs. I want to be able to have this. And so I don't know. It's just hard. It's interesting. And I'm doing what I can do, but it's definitely a field that is still in a lot of progress and moving forward.
Yeah. I don't know if I can't speak for you, but I find in our area, there's no local support group. Our alliance is a 2 hour drive from where I live. So I get involved with the Kentucky Brain Injury Association. Um, and they're just across the river from me in Indiana. But the thing is, here there's no in person support group. But I've found in town, just because I'm always telling people, hey, I have a brain injury. Please be patient with me. My numbers come out weird. And I do get that compassion back. And there's times I'll hear, oh, my brother has a brain injury, or my sister, or and I'm thinking, I don't understand the stigma why people put a barrel over their light. We're human too. And that's why this podcast is so important to me, to spread awareness. It's not about Rob, it's about helping survivors, helping caregivers, having professionals come on the podcast so they can say, hey, this is something you might try. This is something that other has worked for others. So that's what I wanted to do this for. I wanted to have purpose for my injury.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical. And I think, you've got to be the advocate. And that was one reason why I emailed you saying, hey, I want to be on the podcast, because I didn't realize how much being an advocate entailed or
Hmm.
required. So when we were here at the local level 2 trauma hospital, and thank God for them, they saved his life. They did, had to do the amputation and things. but they were just trying to send us across the street to like a rehab type
Yeah.
facility. Well, when I started asking about the neurology aspect, they didn't have neurology. And I said, well, that's our biggest concern at this point is the
Hmm.
neurology. Yeah, we've got this amputation, but we have also this severe brain injury. And so the hospital, after we were in the ICU for a couple of weeks, we were on just kind of a surgery floor that we kind of didn't step down, which we probably should have. But, I had to get really like firm with the case manager and say, we're not leaving. We refused to leave the hospital. And I've had people tell me all the time, we didn't know you could do that. I said, I will move in here and this will be my permanent address unless you can find us a center with the neurology aspect. Well, by the end of the day, I was getting phone calls from Texas and Florida. She finally looked at, these brain rehab centers,
Hmm.
but I had to get really kind of nasty about it. And the doctors were like, he needs to get out of here. He needs rehab. And I
Yeah.
had to just really advocate because they could tell me how to move him across the street to this rehab. And yeah, if you broke your shoulder, leg, hip, that's probably the perfect place to go. I don't
Right.
disagree. This was way severe. They'd never had anyone, at least on this floor, like I said, the surgery floor, that had went to the Shepherd Center, had done transportation. It was all very new. And, it added a week or two extra to our time. But thank God I did. And I ended up talking
Yeah.
to one of these like rehab centers, and the guy was like, oh, well, if you had signed, because I think they had already even signed the paperwork. They were just waiting on me to agree. Yeah, we'll take him to this help, whatever called healthcare thing. He said, well, if you would have signed the paperwork, you would have been stuck there for 6 weeks. You would have had to done your due diligence. And I'm thinking, no one explained that. Thank God I never signed
Hmm.
anything. I know they were trying to kick us out because you don't want to stay in the hospital longer than possible
Right.
terms. But just that advocacy, and thank God his sister, as a nurse, and was like, hey, you can refuse to leave the hospital. We can wait. We don't have to feel rushed out. And that was probably the biggest advice I had ever heard. And then I had a girlfriend who put the Shepherd Center phone number in her phone, set her alarm for 3 p.m. 7 days a week, called, left voicemails every day of the week to the director or whoever for I don't know how many weeks. They called us and said, we're going to have a bed open on this date. But it just takes that persistence. You
Yes.
have to follow up. You have to push. You have to
Hmm.
call, Google, research, ask various therapists, ask people, because yeah, where are all the TBI people? I don't know. I really don't know of that many here locally, but just to
Yeah.
find the proper resources.
Right. That's my biggest pet peeve with hospitals. Their job is to treat you, to make sure you don't die, and show you where the door is. They don't give a flip about anything other than saying, most of the time they're going, oh, just go home, relax a few days, and then go back to work. Worst advice you'd give anybody
Yeah.
with a brain injury.
Zero resources, zero help, zero, even from the neurosurgeon. Like, hey, there's a brain injury association. Hey, nothing. And I
Right.
thought, we spent 6 weeks way before
Hmm.
we ever went to this specialized, brain injury spinal cord rehab center. Not one person, not one resource, not even the case manager sitting down. Here are your options. Okay, Mika. It was just, hey, we send all our patients across the street to the rehab.
Right.
That's what we know how to do best. I can tell you how to do it in 5 minutes, easy. And
Yeah.
I was about to lose my mind.
I was
So
a year out before I realized there was a brain injury association. And
yeah,
I've spoken with people from the Brain Injury Association of America, and actually the director there is working with hospitals. It's a long drawn out process because every hospital uses a different computer
yeah.
system. But eventually, once everybody partners with the Brain Injury Association on the discharge papers, it's going to have resources, things to do after a brain injury. It's not going to be any more of this relax for a few days and go back to work.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, the Shepherd Center was amazing in that, and teaching and training and classes. And here's the follow up. Here's XYZ. I mean, they provided resources. I'm sure at some point they did talk about brain injury. Like I said, it wasn't quite as pertinent then. Okay, we're getting home. What do I got to do? Do I have a hospital bed? Do I have XYZ? Because he had a trach as well. He had a feeding
Yeah.
tube. So there's so many aspects to this wheelchair. that, we had in getting home. And I'm like, dang, now is the time I need to go back. I could really, go through the resources. So I had to look up some of that stuff because it's all in the paper. Here's resources, here's stuff for South Carolina. And I remember one day at like school, okay, let me go through what is there again? What did they list? And having to just look there. But no one, there was the local PT lady that did the grassroots group. Other than her, I mean, nobody was just sitting there sharing anything. It really was like, oh, well, find for yourself. And even the therapists that we worked with, finding people that really believed that Mitch could walk, he could use his prosthetic and walk, that was even hard because I felt like in the beginning, the first people he paired with, I don't know that they really thought he will be able to walk because we had 2 doctors tell us his brain will never tell his legs to walk. And when I look at Mitch sometimes when he gets very depressed and I'm worthless, Mika, I can't drive, Mika, I can't walk, I can't work. I say, Mitch, you're a breathing, walking, talking miracle. I know you don't know it. I know you don't remember it. Look, because he'll say when I died, he calls it his death. But I'll say, yeah, Mitch, you pretty much did have a near-death experience. You talk about, or in the beginning, he talked about, I saw Jesus, I saw angels. I said, look, Mitch, you were like for real knocking on death's door. You're back here. So we're going to deal with this because you're here. Okay, you didn't go on. You're here. But the doctor said this, and this is what you're doing now. And I honestly believe if I take him back to Atlanta, Georgia, and wheel him in there or he's on his walker, their jaws would drop at how well he's doing. Because I remember the neurosurgeon when we left Florence and went to Atlanta, I said, I'm going to bring Mitch back one day and he's going to be walking and talking. And the neurosurgeon said, if that ever happens, I think I'd like to see that. And I just thought, I want to prove these doctors wrong. And having that mustard seed of faith, I don't think that I probably ever prayed as hard as I could or cried, but I wrote my husband's obituary, Rob. I honestly, that's how severe and serious it was. And I didn't have the faith then. Now it's been a massive journey for me on many levels, but I thought this is the reality of things at this point. And I thought, well, I need to be prepared. I'm a teacher. I need to be prepared. I don't do things last minute, And so I tell people, when he had the amputation, I threw away all of the left-sided shoes. I wrote his obituary. And so it's just hard in the long run, 5 months away from home and in the hospital. It's hard on anyone. That's a lot.
It is.
And, like I said, thank God we were old enough not to have the children and grandchildren and family aspect that a lot of couples have, and it's just been a massive learning curve. And I still try to research and find resources and, watch your YouTube podcast episodes and, just learn, because that's the only way we're going to get better is trying, vitamins. I mean, he was on so much medicine coming home that now he takes more vitamins and medicine. He's on 3 prescriptions. And so just getting, okay, what do we need for this cognitive aspect? Obviously, no one in the hospital told us, hey, make sure he's on a lot of omega-3, fish oil, 6-9, whatever. He needs the fish oil. He needs that, I guess that should be intuitive, but even some of that nutrition aspect, too, or hey, if the confabulation is really strong, B1, he needs the B vitamin. And I had a speech therapist tell me that, because for the longest time, he was just making up stuff left and right, just, really believing and really, I drove last week, I did this, I did that. And, there's just so many aspects of it and in the research and, like hyperbaric oxygen, so many people tout that. There's nowhere here other than the hospitals that do it. So I'm having to call places an hour and a half out to try to seek some of that. Like I said, being in a more rural part of the state hurts you in some ways because, we don't have access to the functional neurologist. I found a great one that talked to us in some of the various like vestibular therapy that he could probably use and, just some different resources we just don't have as much access to. And yeah, it's been a lot.
Yeah, that's a big drawback for living in a small town. But, even some of the bigger cities don't even have access to some of that stuff too. Basically because it's expensive and the insurance doesn't want to pay for any of that, which is, it's a shame. It's a big shame. And I wish, I've always said, I wish I could get like this program to make a lot of money so I could say, oh, that person has a need. Well, let's just pay for that need.
Yeah.
That's what I'm in for. I don't want it so Rob Ball can get rich, because
I know. I said, if I win the lottery, I'm going to create a Shepherd Center here in Florence, South Carolina, and in our whole state, South Carolina does not have any type of rehab neurotype specialized like center like they have in Atlanta. I
Right.
think the University of South Carolina in our capital, Columbia, is going to build one. That's 2 years out, and I don't know to the extent and all the details of it, but I know they're trying to have some kind of facility,
Yeah.
I guess, like a Shepherd Center. But, we don't have anything of that sorts in the state. And see what we were having with some of the fairly good rehabs is since he was unconscious, they wouldn't take him then. Now, that was a godsend because we did end up at Shepherd, who specialized in the TBIs. But I mean, like I said, hitting brick wall after brick wall, I was calling all over trying to find, the rehabs with the neurology aspect of it. And yeah, just him being just unconscious, we weren't getting anywhere.
Yeah. I'm so thankful that he's still here and that you're such a great caregiver. I mean, people
Thank
should,
you.
everyone watching, this is what a caregiver is. It's someone who wears that cape around the clock.
And it's hard. I mean, every day I have to pep talk myself. And I
Mhm.
have never been one to listen to motivational speakers, to listen to preachers or pastors or super religious. I mean, I just went because I'm from the South and, you go to church.
Yeah.
And, I really had to find some motivational speakers and people that spoke to me to encourage me because day in and day out, I felt like I was drowning every day or like
Hmm.
trudging 2 steps forward, 1 step back, like barely getting ahead. And it's still like that some days. I'm exhausted. I can hardly get up and function. I have to go teach in front of high school students. But, I know that he needs me. I know that his needs need to be met. And, I don't want to see someone I love eventually in a nursing home. And,
Yeah.
hey, that's probably going to happen at some point down the road in life, depending. But, I want to be the best I can for him. And even putting the shoe on the other foot, if that were me, but it's a lot, and I am that perpetual learner, that teacher in me. So
Hmm.
I strive to find these resources and call. And I know everyone's not like that, but I'm like you, Rob. I want to help. If I find a resource, I want to share it. I want to connect. Hey,
Yeah.
there's this group. Hey, oh my gosh, go check out this. I've always kind of been like that. I'm not a gatekeeper. I share. I'm a teacher. Hey, I'm going to share everything. Even if you don't want to know, I'm going to share this resource or this dates.
I
I'm all the
love
time
it.
telling my students all these dates and things, and other teachers are like, why are you telling them this? But, hey, the more you know, the better. And so,
Knowledge is power. It really is.
yeah, it is. And I realize that more and more. And I know I'm the walking, talking billboard for TBI, but you got to have someone to help. Like I said, I didn't know. And thank God if you don't know what a TBI is. Thank God if you don't know these terms. Thank God if you have never heard of hyperbaric oxygen or no PTOT speech. I don't want you to know these terms. But hey, if you're listening to this and you do know these terms, or if you know Rob's story or mine, then there's something going on here. And knowledge is power. And there's just not education in that healthcare. There's hardly any compassion anymore in healthcare, much less the education piece. And I often thought, gosh, I wish I could, quit teaching like you said and go help and educate.
Yep.
And I need to write a book. I need to do this. I need to do that. But then I'm going, okay, I'm a math teacher, Meike, you're not a writer. But I want to help people too. I tell people, hey, if there's someone with a brain injury locally, contact me. Let me help them. Or even an amputee, because that's a big mental struggle for my husband as well. He wakes up, my leg is broken. Then he wants surgery to fix his leg. Put
Hmm.
my foot back on. I want, and so it's just, on top of the TBI, then we got the amputation, then we've got the mobility, we've got, the right-sided guardedness. And so it's just so many complicated things in one.
If you ever decide to write a book, get with me because I know the perfect publishing company. I really do.
Okay. And I did take a quick writing course with the person I told you about earlier that has written some books. And I've thought about it, and I've been thinking about it, and I go, even if I just help one person or 5 people, I mean, it's worth
Yeah.
it, because I didn't know these resources were available. No one told me. Now I know, and we're
Hmm.
a year and a half out, but it would have been nice if someone handed me like step-by-step guide, or, just something to help along the way. And I love to help people. That's my job. And especially with something like this.
I'll share with you because I really didn't know that anyone would have any interest in reading a book that I wrote.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm not a writer. I'm just a brain injury survivor. And I've got the praise from the most unlikeliest of sources. Even my sister-in-law she read the book. I think she stayed up and she said she wasn't going to bed until she finished it. And she texted me the next day and she said she's losing her sight and she can't drive anymore because she has no peripheral vision. And she said, I've really been mad at God and didn't really realize it, that I was mad at God. And she said, the words that you said really resonated with me. And I am not mad anymore. She says, I am thankful that I'm alive, that I've got breath in my body. And she says, and I'm healing and I'm moving forward. I'm like, okay, great. But the best report that I got was not even about my book. It's I went to the library a few weeks back. They invited me to come set up and sell books to other authors. And they told me there was a lady there that was really wanting to meet me. I was like, okay. So she came up to my table as soon as she got there and she was like, oh, I'm such a fan. And I'm like, me? But she shared her story with me about her brother. Her brother, he was 1'9" when he found out that he had a brain tumor. He was in
Mm,
the bathtub taking a shower and he fell and hit his head. And that's how they found out. And the dad had to break the door down. And she said it was just life changing. And he lived until he was 30 and he passed away from the injury.
mm,
Um, but she just thanked me for for getting out there and acknowledging and shining a light on the injury that nobody talks about.
mhm.
You know, a lot of people get the sent home from the hospital to just live their best life.
That's how I felt when we left Shepherd. It was kind of like, you've been here 14 weeks, you've maxed out your insurance, good luck.
Yeah,
And I honestly felt, I mean, I don't know if I want to use the term getting kicked out. I honestly felt
yeah,
that way. I begged and begged for extensions. Luckily, he met some criteria and we got like a 6-week extension. We are supposed to come home in February, it ended up being April, and they knew my spring break was coming. So they kind of worked with me a little bit, but honestly, and I cornered the PT and I said, "Are you the reason we're going home?" She said, "Yep, this is
mm,
as good as it gets. Good luck. Get some at home therapy." And I just thought, I bet. I said, I'll do anything, please. And it just was like, no, you get 14 weeks. This is the max. It's not workman's comp. So good luck. And I really felt kind of kicked out. And then brick wall after brick wall. I mean, luckily outpatient ended up being a good fit for us with physical therapy versus at home, the
yeah,
PTOT speech part. But it was a struggle. And then I go, oh my gosh, every week he's not getting physical therapy. He's regressing so much, because it took about a month for us to finally get the outpatient therapy going because we were trying to start with the at home. And there's just kind of a lack of some therapists here in the more rural area. And so, yeah, I mean, it just helping someone and letting them see that, there is life, there is hope. And even if you get kicked out, hey, don't stop fighting. And I often think, what would have happened had we not advocated for him, if I had not gone to the
yeah,
case manager and stood my ground and, fought for things, where would we be? I don't know, but I just have to keep going every day. And it is very sad at the state of things, about that kind of
yeah,
compassion and that piece of it.
yeah. I'm so glad you're a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a mission. I have ups and downs day to day, week to
Yeah,
week. And like, yesterday I came home and I was kind of having a panic attack. And so it goes and comes. And, I just have to pep talk myself into, hey, you got to be there for Mitch. In the beginning, everyone warned you, okay, Mika, you're a caregiver. You got to take care of yourself. And I did it. And what does that mean? It's not just getting your nails done and a manicure. It's a lot more than that, and a lot more
yeah,
mentally than, yeah, it's nice to get your nails done, to go get groceries, to have 10 minutes to run to whatever store you like. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love it. But that's such a big piece, that mental aspect. And no one
yeah.
really warns you quite like,
Hmm.
that of how deep and dark it can be, because it is a tough road. I mean, there is no getting around it. That
Right.
every day it is tough, in my
It's a
opinion.
full time job.
Hmm.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people? nuggets of encouragement can you give to
Well,
other
I'm glad you
caregivers?
found this podcast. You have got a great podcast and resource here with Rob. He is a great guy, and I've learned a lot from his podcast videos and YouTube. And I would just say, don't stop trying. Try to be a researcher, your own advocate. Ask questions. Thank God I've always asked questions my whole life, and just keep asking. Don't stop. Whoever you pray to, just keep praying and have faith, and don't give up, and reach out to people like us, or people, if you do find someone in your state or area or nearby, let them know you're struggling, or I need this resource, I need that. And don't stop. And eventually you'll get somewhere, and just, do the best and take care of yourself mentally, whatever that entails,
Yeah.
talk therapy or whatever type of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely, I like how a girlfriend you're putting the me back in Mika, because I hadn't for a long time. And I realized how important that aspect is of this whole process as the caregiver.
Mm-hmm. Be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it goes both ways for the caregiver and the survivor. You got to be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
Meike, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this talk with you. And please don't go away. I'll talk to you real quick after the podcast. But guys, thank you for joining us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Share this with somebody who might need to hear these words of encouragement. You never know who can benefit from just hearing these kind words. Until next week, this is Life Rewired.